All right, welcome everybody. This is the Matt Jones Show. And you know, when I did my first show, I guess, of the old Matt Jones podcast, which started many, many, many years ago, my first guest was Bomani Jones. And I thought, how fitting that we're starting it back and we bring him back, my longtime friend, Bo, from ESPN, HBO, now CNN. He was a writer. He did local radio. You've done everything. Bomani, thank you very much, man.
I appreciate you. It dawned on me, like, we're not in the round number stage yet, but we are almost at 20 years of knowing each other.
Yeah, so let's start with that. Tell everybody how we met. You were a lot of people don't know, you did local radio for a long time.
Yeah, but this was before I did local radio. I was writing for Page 2, and I wrote a story about Carolina and Kentucky had played at the Dean Dome. This was the last year of Tubby Smith, and it looked like everybody had checked out on that. And I wrote
2000. It was 2006. Yeah,
2006. So I wrote down my feeling that everybody had checked out, and I probably got a couple things wrong, and I know this because you reached out to me about it, which went okay. And you made a very worthwhile point that I wasn't thinking about, is that there's a racial dynamic in how Tubby is evaluated, and how I, as young black guy, my words could then be used on a topic that, to be fair, and I have a better appreciation for it now than I did then, I only knew but so much about. So I was like, okay, this is cool. It was actually interesting because I can't remember the reason ESPN took it down. Like, they felt like there was some detail that wasn't correct or whatever.
I didn't know they took it down.
That was part of what was famous about it, was that they had taken the piece down after it went up for whatever the reason. But okay. I do remember very clearly that after that, you're like, hey, you ought to come on our radio show. And I said, okay, fine. And I went on, and I couldn't believe you guys were talking like this about things in sports. I was like, oh, y'all talk about Duke like this? This is crazy. I agree, but this is crazy.
Well, at the time, you had written something that was kind of like, maybe Kentucky needs to make a change.
Yes.
And I was a generally pretty positive Tubby guy, and a lot of folks were using your words to go, see, we're not racist. We want Tubby gone. Here's a young black guy that wants it too. When you have opinions that are genuinely your opinions, but then people that might be bad actors in your mind take them for arguments you don't want, how does that work? I'm sure that's happened to you before.
Yeah, it just happened recently. We're talking about Shadoor Sanders
yes,
and the draft. And so what has made it complicated is actually the presence of the internet, or maybe the internet has made it a little bit more simple, in that the internet has made everyone more tribal. And I think a thing the internet has done that we don't talk enough about is it has minimized intra-group disagreement, right? Like, so a lot of these young columnists that I see, and I don't even know if columnist is the right term anymore, right? But like young people who traffic in opinions, they seem to figure out what everybody's already saying and then distill that into one thing and then give people back what they already said in the first place. Because you can go workshop anything on the internet, right? Like, you can go figure out on a social media platform, how's this take going to go over, and then decide if the people that you care about are going to feel the same way. To me, I feel like, A, that's cheating, and B, I feel like that's not particularly interesting. Like, if you're really good at this, then you've earned the respect of your audience, and they'll go with you when they don't necessarily agree with you and maybe think about it a different way. But people are also now far less likely to actually do that. And so one thing I have decided to push back on is the refusal I see from other people to criticize within whatever the group may be, whether the group is the left, whether the group is black people, whether the group is young people, whether the group is fans of a particular team, or whatever it is. Like, we've got to have the healthy dialogue within that.
Let me explain to people who might not know what you said. You said about Shadoor Sanders, I believe something like, maybe he needs to be a little more humble.
Yeah, he did it wrong. He did it wrong, right?
He did it wrong. Yeah. And that was also the kind of thing that, like, a right-wing columnist would say.
Right.
And that's hard for you to say, even if you're coming at it from a different point.
Well, the trick bag on that is, if you give me time to talk it out, right? Like, my explanation on it was, all of us get humbled by life at some point. Neither you nor I hurt for confidence, right? We have both had moments where we're like, oh, okay, we got put in check just a little bit by the world. The problem is when people believe that somebody is supposed to do it, typically believing that they themselves, the audacity to believe that you are the humbler, right? You ain't got to worry about that. The world's going to do that. And that's what happened to Shadoor. And so the thing with Shadoor in the draft was, I just had a lot of people who had made the call that it was that there was something nefarious about the fact that he slid in the draft. And I'm like, nah, I don't think that's what happened. I think that what happened was he wasn't necessarily talented enough to be a first-round pick. And then the way that he handled those interviews as though he was the one making the decision, not the teams.
Yes, he did.
And so the teams, and that's what's going to happen, but it becomes necessary to say those things. The problem is some of the worst people in the world also felt the same way. Broken clock, a couple times a day, it gets something right. But I can't let those people, I never let those people determine what I'm going to say, right?
Yeah, so you didn't feel like you could have the opinion, Shadoor should have been a first-round pick.
Right.
If you didn't think he should be a first-round pick,
yes.
Right? I mean, like, you can't have that opinion.
Yeah, and it's one thing where I think that there's healthy room for disagreement, then okay, you think he was a first-round pick, that's fine. The trick bag was something like Shadoor was playing college football for a non-college football audience. So the people who were the most invested in that are the people who are probably the least informed and the least aware. And so I look up and I see a buddy of mine, a writer, and he says something about, well, show me a time when a guy won the Johnny Unitas Award and had numbers like these and then fell all the way to whenever. I was like, Gardner Minshew, 2019, 6th-round pick with all these numbers that you said. Like, we got to...
They probably didn't even know that, right? They probably didn't even know it.
No, he had no idea. He was operating on what, to be fair, is a somewhat reasonable proposition that these white folks is doing us wrong. There is an extended track record where if that is your default, I understand why you start there, but you can't just go there no matter what, right? Especially if you're trying to make the point in public, because you're already going uphill when you're trying to make that point to anybody at all. It's not worth it to make that point unless you're sure. Like, to me, you can't just be guessing. You got to have a really, really strong case rather than just a correlation. And I thought with Shadoor, what a lot of that was simply was a correlation. And then the argument I saw from people, and it was, again, there's a track record of this, of they wanted to tame they just wanted to tame this outspoken black man. I'm like, he's not outspoken, he's obnoxious. Those are two different things. So, like, I think the internet gets us with a lot of conflation of terms, and people get really charged up, and they have to be on the side and everything else. And I'm not going to play that game with people. Like, I feel like I've earned the respect that you're going to listen to me regardless of whether or not I agree with you.
One of the people that said that was Stephen A., who said something like, this is like Kaepernick. And I don't really know Stephen A., but I wanted to be like, look, it is clear Kaepernick had the NFL. They had come together and violated antitrust. That's why they settled with him, and that's why he's not played since then. Stephen A. has become this figure where whatever he talks about gets a lot of attention, including the absurdity that people think he could run for president. You've known him a long time. I know you respect his work when he was a writer. How do you feel about this notion that he's almost become this spokesman somehow for not just sports, but anyone who might be on the left or anyone, like, we all have to hear what Stephen A. thinks about anything?
So what I think is interesting about that, and it doesn't happen so much anymore, but I noticed that I was getting a heavy push from the algorithm. Whenever he would go on anything or talk about any politics, like there are engagement farming accounts that put up stuff that Stephen A. says on his podcast and everything else. I think part of what happens when we start talking about running for president now is people start talking about candidates for president in the context of, do you think they can win? And the arguments behind
not whether they should be president.
But the arguments behind why you think somebody could win is, well, how many people know who this person is already, and so forth and so on. It's all these things that don't have anything to do with your actual ability to govern. But of course, that's reinforced by the person that is actually the president, right? And so Stephen A. is really famous. I think that's the part that gets like lost and undersold. He's really famous, and running for president is effectively a television contest. Now, I am going to read something to you that I found in a book that I was reading just the other day. It was
Look at you already having this pulled up. I didn't even tell you topics, and you already have this on your phone.
It just so happened that I was talking to somebody about this because I was reading this Neil Postman book about education that I kind of had to stop reading because I realized that it was more technically about education as a doctrine, like as a study, as opposed to education as, just the general idea. But the point they make, if I can't find the exact phrasing, but the point they make is, after a certain point where the media gets too big and the media is controlled by a certain number of people, like television was the argument they were making, right? That it's going to reach a point where a prerequisite for running for president is that you are a famous person, or that you have a career already as a celebrity. Because
you think that's already the case? You think that's already the case?
Well, it's a fair question. The fact that Stephen A. Smith thing has gotten as far as it has. Look, let me tell you this. There's a story running very soon in the New York Times, and I know this because they interviewed me for it, about the idea of Stephen A. Smith being president. And it's not in the sports media section. Right? Like, it was by a writer I've
do you
never
know
heard
anybody
of.
that wants Stephen A. to be president? Like, I hear people saying that he could be president, but I have yet to meet one person that would want Stephen A. Smith to be president.
No, I don't know anybody who has said that. I appreciate the fact that Stephen A. appreciates that this is ridiculous, right?
Do you think he does? Do you think he does?
He has said at every turn that the idea that someone wants me to be president is an indictment primarily of the Democrats.
But nobody wants him to be president. He wills that into existence.
But these polls have willed that into existence. The people that put his name on the paperwork, Cuomo and Bill O'Reilly doing, wow, what a salad. Those three guys doing like town halls and stuff like that. Now, to be fair to Stephen A., what Stephen A. will tell you is that he's done political commentary on television for a very long time, which again is true, but so have I, and I'm not going to be the one to run for president. I also think that part of why people are willing to entertain this notion is that right now he has gotten behind a very bipartisan idea, which is banging on the Democrats. Everybody enjoys that, loves that song, right? Like, that one has crossed over. It is top 10, number one with a bullet. And right fast, this is what the book says. It said, as Paul Goodman has pointed out, there are many forms of censorship, and one of them is to deny access to loudspeakers to those with dissident ideas or even any ideas. This is easy to do and not necessarily conspiratorial when the loudspeakers are owned and operated by mammoth corporations with enormous investments in their proprietorships. What we get is an entirely new politics, including the possibility that a major requirement for holding political office be prior success as a show business celebrity. And now, to me, where he is talking about television, where it gets wonky is I think the people who truly control that information in that way are Musk, Zuckerberg, and the people that control the social media algorithms. And they can greatly decide who does or doesn't get famous. Like, the idea of Stephen A. Smith as president I was getting bombarded with it about a month and a half ago, and I didn't ask for it.
Yeah. So you're, if people can't already tell, and I'm sure they can, you are an extremely intelligent person. I have watched, as with you have to try to have success in a world that is for carnival barkers. I have to do the same thing. You have to be funny, you have to be entertaining, et cetera. And you have to walk that line. And some people can do it and some people can't. Do you feel like you are able to both be intelligent, make the comments you want to make, but also be funny enough, entertaining enough that they can put you on TV and you'll make good TV?
Well, I mean, I've been doing it for a long time, so I'd like to think that I can, right? Like, I could be wrong, but I think that I can. The reason that I think that I can, and the reason I think I do it fairly effectively, and this is a reason that you and I could be as close as we have, I believe, and I think it's very important, is you and I grew up going to rural public schools.
Yes.
And I think that that's a very important point in terms of your ability to relate to people. We understand what eye level is a little bit differently. And we grew up around people who, if they feel like you're talking over your heads, will try to fight you. Like, you have to learn how to do this stuff.
No, you're right.
And still talk to them, right? So that's like my fundamental belief is that I believe, my brother told me something when I first started writing that I'll never forget. And he said, a great argument is not one that a genius cannot refute. It is one that a fool cannot refute. And so I feel like if I can keep it simple, keep it tangible, and there'll be something funny that comes up along the way, then people will listen to it. And in the end, I think that as long as you're not being a jerk about it, people can identify who are the very smart people, and they want to know what the very smart people think about things, if for nothing else than to affirm them when they agree with the very smart people, right? And so the trick is figuring out how to assume that responsibility without being condescending in the process, which I am not always.
No, the condescending is huge, and Democrats are terrible at that. Our party is much more condescending than the other side. I also think there's been this rise, though, of what I would call the stupid intellectual, which is the person that is just smart enough to sound smart in a minute on TikTok,
Yes.
but then really can't. The example I always use is Charlie Kirk. No offense to the guy, he might be a nice guy. But in a minute, that dude can sound smart. And when they do the things where he brings college kids on and he debates them for 30 seconds, he can sound smart. But if you set him next to a really smart person, he's not going to sound smart. But I think the society and social media now rewards the 1 minute smart person.
I remember when I was in high school, I went to a summer program, like a pre-college prep type of summer program. And a professor came in, and he was a math professor. And I remember it seemed like the most amazing thing in the world. He just started rattling off formulas, right? He would be like, yeah, I do math, so I know that sine squared of x plus a cosine squared of x equals 1. I know that sine theta divided by cosine theta equals tangent theta. Like, he rattled off all these. And, we're fifth year. We're like, whoa, wow, this is so amazing. And I remember I told my mama about this guy. And my mom was a college professor, for those of you who don't know. And she just rolled her eyes. She had been so sick of this man forever with these tricks that he was doing, rattling off these 10th grade level equations, right? Like, she had been so sick of that for the longest, but he was capable of what you're describing, is the presentation of smart that goes away when people ask a few questions. And one thing about the way this internet stuff works is, even with like TV and radio, you were more likely to be in a place where somebody was going to challenge you on what you said and you had to answer for it. You don't really have to do that on your own platform like that. So Charlie Kirk can put this stuff out there, and a million people can reply to him and say, this is wrong, but he never has to answer to them.
And if he debates 15 people and he loses one, he can just not post that one, right? Like, that's the one he doesn't. He doesn't have post.
Charlie Kirk taps into something I'm curious what you think about, where I am convinced that liberals made Charlie Kirk famous. That Charlie Kirk trolled his way into a larger fame.
Oh yeah, we get so upset. We get so upset at the craziest, and we actually amplify them.
Right,
and that's a negative. And by the way, the right does that too. They pick the craziest left person, amplifies them as well, and you end up with extreme voices.
Right, but the left does not. The right values the fact that you antagonize the left. So Charlie Kirk making a bunch of people on the left mad makes him more famous with the right. It doesn't really work that way.
That's true.
It doesn't really work that way in the opposite direction. But I did MSNBC once, and I remember they made some mention of Charlie Kirk, and I had to be like, hey guys, the only reason I know who this man is because people I hate keep talking. People I know keep talking about him. People I like keep talking about him. Yeah. Like, you would go, and that was at the time where you'd go to like his Twitter profile, and it was the same number of followers as it was following, and it was in the hundreds of thousands. Like, he trolled his way into fame, but he would not have gotten big enough if not for this outrage of the left. That wasn't even outrage. It was as much people on the left showing how mad they were to each other.
Yeah, that's right. We're big on sort of looking like we care the most. It's a competition to see who is the most, to use a right phrase, woke. But it's really like, who's got the opinion that gets the most agreement. You go on CNN now, some for that panel show. It's who's the host? What's her name?
Abby Phillip.
Abby Phillip. And there's a guy from Kentucky that you're on quite a bit with that I actually used to do television with. A lot of these listeners will know Scott Jennings. I find it interesting. You, to me, more than deserve to be on there for your intelligence. But it is also interesting to me that CNN feels like that's where they go to get people, is there's all these sports people on there. I mean, Scott Jennings is just a guy in Kentucky. Like, he didn't even, like, there's nothing, he's pretty smart, but he's not qualified any more than anyone else is. Right. It's odd how the experts in politics now are just people that they just kind of pick out of nowhere and say, this is an expert now.
Yeah, it's a mix of people and almost like a sports-like pipeline. Like, hey, you just retired, eh? How'd you like to come get a job on NFL game day? Like, like it's some measure of that. Like with Scott, and I haven't done anything.
You want to punch him. You've wanted to punch him. I know I've wanted to punch him, and I worked with him all the time.
I'll be honest with you. I told him, I was like, hey, I don't need to be on TV with him. Like, I just don't think that's a good idea. Because part of it is I don't want to argue with him, but then you got to argue with him. if he's out there, and then if this goes in a bad direction, I didn't feel like dealing with that as it related to him. But I do notice on a lot of these networks, like I do think that I am qualified to talk about these things. I think I've got the rigor. But I also think it's fair for somebody to look up and be like, why is this guy on television?
Why is this guy on TV?
Yeah.
It would be the same with me. If they put me on, it's like when I used to host the nightly political show in Kentucky, there'd be people who say, why do you get to do that? And I don't really know the answer to that. But that's also, by the way, true about sports. I didn't even play. So like, why do you and I get to talk about sports? We weren't big athletes.
Right. It's all, and you have to show and prove. Like, this is actually an interesting Stephen A. Smith parallel. People were very upset with Stephen A. Smith about him getting Max Kellerman fired. And I respected the fact that Stephen A. owned it. But his point was, people come on every day and ask, why are you here? You weren't a journalist. Yes. You weren't a player. Why aren't you here? And people took that as arrogance. And I'm like, no, sir. That is the question that all of us have to answer every single day when we are on television. Like, we've got to answer it. I will admit, I watch a lot of political television, and I'm not putting this on Newsnight. I'm talking about in the macro. I watch a lot of television, even if the people have some qualification within this political world. I watch a lot of television and say, I don't understand why I'm listening to you.
I'm surprised you watch that. Like, I find it mind-numbing. What makes you watch political television?
I watch some of it just to get a handle of what's going on. I don't watch a lot. I want to be very clear.
Okay.
Like, I don't watch a lot. I'll see clips as they float down on the internet. It is. I mean, look, the business of cable news is in a real bad place because apparently people in general, outside of the Fox News audience, have decided they don't feel like this is a great use of their time anymore.
Yeah.
Which I am fascinated by how like that has happened now. I think people are just kind of burned out on all of it. I think people have just grown exhausted. Like, I think with all if you think about 10 years ago, like the emphasis on social causes that you saw, all of these things, I think people are just in survival mode at this point. And interestingly enough, cable news, they don't feel like it's going to help them survive.
Well, that's interesting. You and I have had conversations about this. After George Floyd, which was just 5 years ago, it felt like a lot of people, companies and all these folks felt like they had to sort of show their commitment to causes. You joked about how for 2 weeks, everybody did their 2 weeks of things. And then it seems to have completely gone in a different direction. And I have friends who are on the left who just now are like, I can't think about it anymore. It frustrates me. And I'm just, like you said, exhausted. Why do you think that happens so quickly? I mean, it just reverts so quickly.
Well, I always felt, though, that George Floyd was a moment that was really 8 years in the making. It goes from Trayvon Martin to George Floyd with 4 years of Trump tacked on the back end of that. And then there was this George Floyd. It was so egregious what happened that we could go back and look at who the people were who always say the terrible thing. And they were like, hey, not this week. Right? Like,
it was the one. They're like, all right, we'll give you this one.
Yeah. Like, there's a guy that owns a website whose name I refuse to say, and I think you know who I'm talking about. Even he refused. He was like, no. We're not doing it this time. And it was such a wild couple weeks. My favorite story about that, Drew Brees got in trouble because he had gone on some news show and in this time was asked about the national anthem. And he said, I think we should stand for the anthem. The standard Drew Brees answer. Drew Brees did not realize that we were in the middle of a moment, right? And he gave the standard Drew Brees answer. And everybody came down on him. One of his teammates even said, fuck you to him. Like, it was wild, everything that happened. But I'll never forget, I was trying to explain to people, I'm like, look, that's always been his answer about the national anthem. He pressed the national anthem button, and that was what came out because it always comes out. And Drew Brees' money is not affected by this. And the point that I made was I went to the Wrangler Twitter account. And this is when everybody was
Wrangler
putting out,
jeans, you mean?
Yes, Wrangler jeans. And everybody was putting out like the black squares with their statements about George Floyd and everything else. And I was like, look, Wrangler has not put one of these out. And you know why? Mm-hmm. Because that Wrangler money doesn't care about this. Their audience does not care. And the point I was making was that it was okay. Right? That's not who their brand
You didn't think Wrangler needed to make a statement.
Right. And clearly neither did Wrangler, right? Because they
Bill Burr has that thing. He goes, he has a joke about this where he talks about Burger King, and he was like, Burger King came out and said, we're very against this. And he was like, I don't go to Burger King to hear what you think about whatever. Like, I come for burgers one way or the other.
But let me tell you this, the very next day, there was a post on the Wrangler Twitter account about this. And this would happen from time to time. Stuff like this could happen where I'd be on my show joking about something. Like once the NBA store had old Golden State Warriors gear, but it was Philadelphia Warriors. And I had not fully realized that Warriors means Indians. Like all the things that are Warriors used to be Indians. Like I had a baseball team that was the Warriors when I was a kid, and it was blue with red letters. It didn't dawn on me that it was really the Cleveland Indians, right? And so it's this wildly offensive imagery on this throwback merchandise that is being sold at the NBA store for the Warriors. I didn't even know it existed. I said something about it on my podcast. I laughed about it. The next day it was gone. Gone, I tell you, gone. And I'm like, dog, I wasn't even getting on you. I was just laughing.
So do you think the people that are kind of the Joe Rogans or of the right who I think that radicalized a lot of those people when those kinds of things happened, do you think they had any point, or do you think that, do you think there was any point that, hey, it went too far?
Well, in sports, I think the example that people typically point to is the NBA bubble and putting Black Lives Matter on the floor and the name, the slogans on the back of jerseys. It was ham-fisted. They didn't know what to do. But if you weren't here for that moment, it's hard to explain like how pressing it was. And these boys are talking about not playing. Like it was all falling apart. They had to do whatever it was.
Well, remember, they were talking about having it in Louisville, and because of Breonna Taylor, the players wouldn't do it. Louisville was one of the 2 or 3 finalists to have it because we have so many gyms where they could do it. And then after Breonna Taylor, the players said they wouldn't do it.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if I would say that there were things that went too far. Like I don't think that there was anything tangible that really mattered that went too far. I do think what happened though was that, as is the case with most social revolutions, and if we will call this a revolution for this discussion, is they're normally spearheaded by young people, and it was spearheaded by this generation of young people that is very, very concerned with language, right? And very concerned with feelings as much as it is anything tangible.
They love feelings, yeah.
And so these like corporate offices and stuff that were full of these young people who got these Slack channels and they were getting everything going. It was about keeping them together and everybody holding the line because everybody's stuck at home. They're frustrated. You know how terrible COVID had to be for white people to get on board in the way they did with this black cause? Like it was so much that was going on, and it is fair to make the argument that the people who were in charge just weren't quite ready for all the responsibility and everything that would then come from that moment. But the truth is that moment lasted for like 3 weeks, maybe 4.
Yeah. Well, I mean, in Kentucky, John Calipari knelt with the team at a game, and it still got brought up 3 or 4 years later. It was one game. It wasn't even in Lexington. It was at Florida. That was the year he went 13-19 or whatever, and it was like the only good game they played all season. But people still remember, and that image stuck with him. And it's interesting. I still have people, Bomani, that 5 years later bring it up to me and said that's when I turned on him. It wasn't the fact that they went 13-19. It was that kneeling that day.
That's for something that is so ultimately benign.
Yeah. Like, that mattered to some people. I thought it was silly, but it did.
It did a lot. And I actually thought that around college places that there would be, if nothing else, an understanding that this is good for business.
Oh, yeah. Mark Stoops has a picture. The whole UK football team and Mark Stoops marched in Lexington, and there's a picture with pale Mark Stoops with his red hair with Black Lives Matter shirt on.
I remember that.
I can't it's wait. Hilarious.
When this gets far enough away for people to do the documentaries on it, and we can go back and look at all Lane Kiffin going down to Lane Kiffin and the late Mike Leach going down to the State House in Mississippi to get the flag down, to get the flag checked.
Mike Leach did it?
Mike Leach. And I want to FOIA the emails that it took for them to make that happen. Because Mike Leach look, I don't need players to play. I don't need to recruit.
Wow, I didn't realize Mike Leach did it. That is crazy. Yeah, there's the great for people in Kentucky will know who this is, but there's a picture of the front of the UK football Black Lives Matter march is Mark Stoops and Landon Young, who literally grew up on a farm in Lexington, whitest guy you'll ever see, and the two of them are standing in the front, both with Black Lives Matter shirts on, and that's when I was like, whoa. Okay, this is in a completely different place.
It was a time, and they rolled back just about everything that came out of that time. And that I think is a fascinating – it's kind of like after Reconstruction, right? Like it feels like the Trump era is a rollback of the Obama era, very similar to post-Reconstruction.
Yeah, it is. Let's talk a little sports for a second. Let me ask you about some things going on right now. I love Carl Towns. Carl Towns is, if you get on TikTok, is a heck of a conversation. People have wild opinions about Carl Towns, but now he's playing well. The Knicks could easily end up going to the Eastern Conference Finals. Carl Towns, people who listen to KSR know, famously, the 2015 UK basketball team all took a shot to going 40-0, and he wanted to be part of it, and they were all drinking alcohol, and he took a shot of air so he could be with his brothers. That's what he said. That, to me, is Carl Towns in a nutshell.
Carl, you know, he's a little bit disappointing as an NBA player. He is so wildly talented. I live in New York now, and so it's interesting because, like, the Dominicans, they got their guy.
Oh, that's right, yeah.
They pressed up Carl Towns jerseys with the Dominican flag on them. You know
really?
I mean? Yeah. Because he's their guy. I just find it so wild that he's out there being guarded by people who are 6'4", and I think
he still shoots threes.
Yeah, it's disrespectful that the teams are willing to guard him like that, and then the Knicks won't give him the ball, which is even more disrespectful.
Yes, it is. You always loved Cal, didn't you?
Yes, I
still love him. You still think he's good?
Yeah, I appreciated what he was doing. Like I did feel this about Cal, that relative to his peers, he cared more about his players than the average coach did. I firmly believe that. And I think I think even after everything that has happened, that is still probably true.
Do you, I've been around it more. I think COVID changed him a little bit. Do you think Mike Krzyzewski, because you've also followed Duke a lot, going and getting one and dones and finally giving in and saying, I'm going to go get Zion and I'm going to go get those guys, I think that changed Cal. What did you ever think you'd see the day that Mike Krzyzewski would be recruiting a one and done kid to a university like Duke where you taught?
Yeah, well, the only thing was Krzyzewski always recruited a lot of one and done kids. He was just arrogant enough to think that he could get them to stay for 2. Right?
Yeah, like Kyrie.
Like he thought he could get Luol Deng to stay for 2 years, right? He thought that if he got Braden Wright to come, he would stay for 2 years. Like the whole list of them. But what Mike Krzyzewski is above all else, and what Duke is above all else, is Duke above all else is a capitalist empire, and Krzyzewski is absolutely on board with that. He teaches this class at Fuqua and all of that stuff. And what he wasn't about to be doing is like Gary Williams was willing to lose. He was willing to lose to do things the way that he wanted to do them. Krzyzewski has never been that guy.
Yeah, you're exactly right about that. For people who haven't seen, when you did your HBO show, your rant about Duke, look it up on YouTube. It's one of the greatest things of all time.
Hold on, can I tell you my favorite thing about that right fast?
Yeah.
My favorite thing about that is it's a comedy piece, right? We talk about why it is that black people hate Duke basketball, and we run through it all the way. But it was the first episode. It's the only episode where we did not do it with a studio audience. And, buddy, you'd have no idea how many people didn't understand that was supposed to be funny. They thought it was serious, and they were mad.
Oh, interesting. It's amazing how much people laughing matters in doing things like that. Just the sound of random people. One time we tried to do on my local TV show a weekend update parody with Kentucky news, and we did it once, and when you watched it, it was unbelievably painful because people weren't laughing. Then we did it again and had an audience, and it was okay. But when you sit there and you try to make jokes and then there's silence, maybe it works on The Office, but it doesn't work in a show like that.
No, we did something a couple months ago in Raleigh, and we played that clip for a live audience.
Yeah.
And they laughed, and it was one of those gratifying moments of my life because I finally got to see that piece as it was intended to be. But we just didn't know. Like, we were just like, we don't need a laugh track. We don't need – no.
Yeah, you do.
You do.
You do.
It's not about how funny you are. You just need it.
Bill Belichick and Jordan Hudson.
Woo!
I find it fascinating. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't care. I know it shouldn't be interesting, but it is to me. You're a smart guy. Is it to you?
It is definitely interesting, right? And what I find to be interesting about it is I have a good friend who refers to Jordan Hudson as fancy, in a metaphor that I think a lot of our listeners can understand.
From Reba McEntire?
Here's your one chance, Fancy. Don't let me down. This is Fancy's one chance. And Fancy is making the most of it. Fancy done got her $8 million in real estate. Fancy is showing up. Like, you look at Fancy's clothes.
I thought about it as Fancy, yeah.
I was at a party at the Super Bowl where Belichick pulled up with Fancy, and she's ready for her close-up, man. Like, I am amazed at how prepared she has been to get all this done.
Okay, so what's your favorite part of it? I'll give you a couple of mine, see what you think. Obviously, everybody focuses on the CBS interview. The fact that Bill Belichick is so smitten, he sat at a Holiday Inn Express in Portland, Maine, and went to the Miss Maine contest. That, to me, is pretty amazing. And then the way she was at the UNC spring game on the field in the boots and the jacket, those two things, I was like, man, this woman has him like to where he's in it.
Matt, he took a video / picture on his back on the beach with his feet up and her on his feet. That is my favorite part of this whole thing. Cause love will have you do any old thing. Ain't nothing too goofy for love. And he is loving her out loud. Like, she got some nerve.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. Because I mean, there's not a scenario I could see me posting any woman like things like that. Could you?
Hell no.
But you and I are both single, so maybe that's partially why.
And look, I'd say, and that's what I was about to say, and that's part of the thing. Like, Bill's the girlfriend he had for all those years, she would put pictures of him on the internet, right? In large part because I don't think he really knows how it works, because somebody asked him about it in the CBS News interview, and he was kind of like, I didn't know anybody had seen that picture, right? Like, he's got all these things going on. He has no clue. But she, somewhere along the way, convinced herself that she knew how to do this. And I think she figured out that these jobs are like a lot of jobs, that it's intuitive. She thinks she has an intuitive understanding of how to be the first lady of these things. And she's like, you guys, like, you need to update your shit for the 21st century. You know, she, like, Bill Belichick is like a caveman to her. And so what I think is most interesting is this is all the talk we're doing before they play games. I don't think that Bill Belichick changes anything about North Carolina.
You think he's the coach in game one?
Oh, he's the coach. He's the coach.
Do you think it works?
This is a over-under 7.5 win program. Like, Kentucky is an over-under 6 win program. Right?
Yeah.
And Mark Stoops can get you consistently 8, and now people are used to that, and so they get a little antsy about whether or not 8 is good enough for you. I think that Carolina is going to still be a 7.5 win program, because I don't know if you guys realize this, but the last time you saw Bill Belichick coaching, he wasn't good at it.
That's true. And I think part of what makes it so fascinating is, of all the people, you wouldn't pick him as that guy, right? You wouldn't have thought. I mean, he seemed like such a grouch and such a, like, no fun and all business. And then the video where she's walking and the jacket is hanging off her arms and she looks like she's like 17 years old. Like, and he's like walking ahead of her. You know, ask any man who goes out, who's dated, you don't walk ahead of the woman. He's way ahead of her. That's partially, to me, also what makes it fast. I mean, the amount of women, Bomani, that care about this story in a way they don't care about sports. Like, when we talk about it on our show, women flood me with responses. This transcends sports, oddly.
I think the most interesting level of this, and I've talked about this on my show, is whom one believes is the predator.
Yes.
In this relationship. Because I think,
and it's flipped, don't you think?
I think there's a tendency for people to look at it as this older man is the predator dealing with this younger woman. And I think that if you talk to anybody who has an older father, and this is not me, by the way, but if you talk to anybody who has an older father who started dating a younger woman, they do not think that the older man is the predator, right? Because the older father is the one writing all these checks and bankrolling the situation. Like, you'll talk to people whose dads are going, like, you sending your dad money, and your dad sending that money to this little young girl that you messing with.
Yeah. I kind of think, though, part of me says, listen, I'm not going to criticize that girl. Maybe it's the fancy part. She seems like, to me, she made a mess up with the CBS program, but otherwise it feels like she's kind of done what she's, I mean, and maybe they like each other. I don't know.
No, she clearly makes him feel alive.
That's good.
The thing I have learned in my travels, Matt, and I believe that you will agree with me when I say it. It seems very simple, but it's the truth. People do what makes them feel good. The people who spend more money than they have, they feel good when they spend the money, right? The problem is the good feeling of spending money doesn't last, but they feel good when they spend the money. People do the thing. We're animals in that regard. They do the thing that makes them feel good, and it is clear she makes him feel, Tony the Tiger, great.
That line is why I love Bomani. I want to ask you just a personal question for a second, because you and I, like you said, we both sort of radiate confidence that some people would say goes into arrogance. Yes. We both have had successes, but we've both had failures, right? I've had some on a lower levels failures. You have had some maybe higher profile failures. For someone like you and like me, who's like, considers themselves a high achieving person. Yes. How do you deal with a failure?
So it kind of depends on what we're talking about, right? So for me, for example, I did a show on HBO called Game Theory. We got 2 seasons. I think that is an unmitigated success. Like, there was nothing that could happen after that show went on the air, because it's so crazy that we got to do the show in the first place, that I would look at that as not being successful, because that was the one thing that I was like, we're so lucky to be here that when I had a deal for 6 episodes, I never thought about the 7th. Success was going to be about how I felt about those 6, and then we got 10 more, and it went the same way. I did a show on ESPN called High Noon with Pablo Torre. That show lasted for about 2 years before they canceled it. That one I would probably categorize more as a failure. It wasn't, I thought Game Theory was very good. High Noon was not very good. I don't think it was bad, but it was not very good. I think I was somewhat fortunate in terms of how I dealt with it, that it ended also right when the world shut down. So there wasn't much time to think about it. There were a million things going on.
But I saw you during that time. You and I met in New York during that period, and it's the only time in my life I've talked to you that I didn't feel like you were doing great. Yeah. Maybe I read that wrong. It just didn't feel like to me you were that happy, and maybe I'm reading it wrong.
No, you're right. What I was not happy about in that time was I didn't have enough going on. Like, I wasn't hurt by that fact, but I did know this. I was not going to be hosting a television show for ESPN ever again. And I was overqualified for any other job that you had for me to do on TV at that point. That wasn't it. So, no, I was a little lost in the wilderness at that point, certainly. And it didn't feel good. But after I flunked out of graduate school, which is probably the biggest thing that I would consider I did, that was a failure. What I realized was...
I didn't know you did that.
Yeah. I didn't pass the micro-qual the second go-round. So all that meant was that maybe, just maybe, I'm not a PhD level microeconomist. It's not exactly the biggest insult in the world, right? If that's the case. Like, I'm still qualified to teach college. I could still, there's somebody who could be a Nobel Prize winner that I could teach in Econ 101 who will appreciate the fact that they had me. Like, all of those things. I had to recognize, and that moment taught me, I don't have to be great at everything that I do, right? And so when High Noon didn't work, it was just like, okay, well, what are we going to do now? But what I learned was there's no stopping in this. There's no room for self-pity. And truly, if you have not slipped up somewhere along the way in this, it's because you're not trying that hard. Like, I've worked with people who have never had failures, and one thing they have in common is they're not trying that hard. Their ambitions aren't the same as mine. Like, do you realize the level of ambition or what I learned in this? It sounds dramatic because I'm saying it about myself, but I do believe this. It took a little bit of courage for me to sit up in a suit at a desk for 2 seasons telling jokes. Like, I was doing the Trevor Noah job, the John Oliver job, the Bill Maher job, and I did it. I think, like, I was getting better, and it could have been better, and it wasn't. I'm not saying it was the greatest ever, but we did it, and I think we did a good job of it. And I think about that way more than I think about the end of it. That's crazy. That's just setting yourself up for misery.
Totally agree. I had 2 local TV shows, and the first one was a failure. It didn't work. I wasn't the easiest to work with, but it made it to where I felt like the second one was good. I see your Emmy back there. We won an Emmy, and like I feel good about it. What's interesting though is it's interesting to hear you say your failure was dropping out, or was not getting the second round on the micro econ. When I was doing the wrestling company, we did not get a second season of that documentary, the wrestler show. And there are people who will say to me, you should have had a second season. How did they not give you a second season? And I wanted to be like, dude, I bought a regional wrestling company and got Netflix to make a show. Look, I forget the second. I can't even believe they did one. I mean, can you believe that they did a show and I got the director who did Cheer and the Dallas Cowboys show to do Last Chance U. He did it.
Right.
So to me, it's all about perspective, like you said.
The HBO show was literally my dream job. I don't care if I ever do a TV show again. I have checked off every box that I ever wanted to do. How in the world do you think you're going to make me feel like I failed by literally achieving
living your dream?
A dream. And I don't have a lot of dreams.
You said you didn't want to say his name, so I won't say his name. Actually, I have to. You don't have to say it. He's on these stations. He's on this station we're on. Clay Travis, who has spent almost a career of picking at you for a long time. He really liked it. Without addressing him, what is it like to have a person that every single thing you do, they're sitting there ready to poke you about it and have a mini army of people joining you? People who listen to this, you may have heard Clay earlier today. Heck, he may have talked about Bomani today. He likes to pick at you. Does it anger you? If you saw him, what would you do?
It is frustrating. For me, it is frustrating on a larger level because I believe, and this is something you and I have talked about like our work, and it's what I've talked about this on the air when I've guest hosted your show. What frustrated me most about him and what they do is I believe they have created a caricature of me that does not really exist, right? And so I do not work to achieve. I'm not in this to make white people like me, right? But I also believe that we have more in common than people give us credit for. Like, our friendship is a testament to the fact that I have more in common with the people who listen to you than I think that people realize if they'll just give it a chance and get over whatever trash they got in their heads. And so what frustrates me is when somebody like Clay leans in on what this nonsense is and stops what connections we could actually make amongst ourselves as people. And I know we can because I did radio in Raleigh and I fought against all of this stuff early. And then by the time I left, I was a fairly beloved figure across the board because they realized, like, we have more in common with each other than probably anybody else that you're going to hear on the air. Because, again, I'm a product of rural public schools. Like, we're there. And so that's what frustrated me most about them and all of that. What I realized, though, is their army of people is largely bots. Like, when I would look on the internet, when something from that website would come down about me and who the people are who are talking about me, none of the accounts seem real. Now, I actually stumbled upon Clay Travis at the Super Bowl this year.
Oh, really? Because, see, I know you both. I'm friends with you. I'm not really friends with him, but I've known him for a long time. What was that like?
I realized in the very short conversation we had that he and I are not built the same. We do these jobs for much different reasons, and this is all wrestling to him. It is all wrestling. That was the conclusion I came to from him, is that to him, this is wrestling, and as long as everybody's making money, what's the big deal? And
so did he like try to be your friend when he saw you? You don't have to say if you don't want.
Not quite my friend, but I will say that he behaved in a way that misunderstood how seriously I take what I do.
Interesting.
And I don't.
Yeah,
I think
I've seen you angry, and when you're angry, you're angry. Before we wrap up, I
chose to walk away. I'll tell you that.
Oh, you did? Okay.
I chose to walk away. Because look,
I'd love to have seen that.
You can't give nobody like that none of you, because that's a victory to them. You know what I mean? Like, all you can do is walk away.
Yeah, that's true. I need to learn that lesson because I people always tell me, man, when these folks come after you, you need to let it go. That's harder for me than it probably is most people. Maybe because I grew up in Eastern Kentucky and you don't just walk away.
Oh, I've had to learn.
Yeah, and I can't fight, so I would fight with words, and it's hard for me just to walk away. I'll wrap up because I know you got to go. One time you said something to me that I still quote, and I don't even remember what the issue was. It had something to do, I can't remember, but you were watching the NBA Finals. It was when LeBron was playing against Durant and the Thunder in the Finals, and something happened, and I called you because I wanted to know your opinion. And you answered the phone and you said, I'm watching the NBA Finals. What's up? And I asked you some question, and it was basically exactly what your response is. You paused and you go, Matt, I love you, but I can't be the black friend you call anytime you want a black opinion. That was basically what you said. Yeah. It was like, you're calling me because I'm black to ask what I think about this. And it really did change the way I thought, not just about you, but a lot of things. Explain to me why you said that, and do a lot of people do that with you?
At various points in my life, yes. Like, I think I served that purpose for Dan Le Batard in many ways at points in time. But it was in part also because I think Dan was very fascinated by the idea that a black person could be this smart, which I never got that vibe off of you. Right?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, like that's not it. Like I think Dan couldn't believe that this happened. Like it was like, wow, look at that fish riding a bicycle. Like he just you know, like he just hadn't. And to be fair to him, he lived in Miami. He don't see no smart people at all, let alone a black one. Like that's not.
No, you lived in Miami. You hated it, didn't you?
Oh, I mean, it wasn't bad for me because I had bread, right? But like if you don't have bread, I don't. It's a very thoughtless place. That's the best way that I can put it. It's the least thoughtful place I've ever been. But no, that can happen from time to time. And I think and white people don't realize this, that there's a tendency to take the black person you know and that black person be the spokesman for all the black people. And I can't speak for all of them, right? And so I know there's no harm in, like, the only reason I would say that to you is because I know there was no harm intended. Because if there was harm intended, I'd have just never took the calls in the first place, right? But I definitely wasn't about to miss out on the NBA Finals to be your Sherpa. That wasn't going down. I'm over here living.
And it was
life.
A good series too. I mean, Thunder Cavs was a good series.
It was, but I also. So what's interesting about that for me, though, in a professional capacity, is you can sign me up to be the person that speaks for black people, but you have no idea what's coming after you do that. Anything, todo es posible. In that moment, like that would happen for Dan often, where he would call me on this show to be the black person, and he would not necessarily get the thing that he thought was coming.
Yeah. Do you get angry when people are asked to be the representative for black voices and you don't think they're representative? Like, I'm just picking a person, but it could be a lot of people, Candace Owens or something like that.
What I will say about that is with somebody like Candace Owens, the people who are doing that are being very particular and calculated in what they're doing. So that doesn't make me nearly as angry, but I do have a twinge of what should I do when they call me to be this person, because God knows who the next call is. Right?
No, that's interesting. If you don't do it, who will they get?
Yeah, like this next person might not actually be smart. I may agree with that person, but that person's background, like there's a lot of things that kind of come down to it. But like I did it's so funny, like being the black guy on television, because this was a non-black topic, but I did something, a CNN hit about Trump and Saban and the NIL commission. And I said something about, like, basically they don't need to cut down on the money they're paying players, because I'm like, hey, man, there are always going to be people out there who love to trick off on college students. And there was this pause from the two hosts. It was two women because they weren't ready for that. And then one of them goes, no doubt.
They said no doubt?
She said no doubt. Because that seems like something you say after somebody says something about tricking.
Yeah.
That seems like the appropriate answer.
They'll call you for the answer they want, and then you don't give it. Like, so I've had that happen twice with the New York Times. They called me once to say, do you think Andy Bashir can get elected president? Then I was playing the role of Mr. Kentucky guy. Right. And I went, no, because you have to understand the unique circumstances of him. His dad was the governor. Everyone hated Matt Bevin. And then we've had these huge tragedies that he's been really good during. I don't think that translates nationally. And it was clear they wanted me to say, yes, he could be president. Then the second time was the Stephen A. Smith. New York Times called me to ask about whether or not he could be president in sports, right? Like in the sports world. Probably the same article. And I was like, no, Nobody wants him to, like, he's respecting the sports community, but nobody says Stephen A. Smith should. And both times, I doubt my quotes probably won't get used because I didn't give them what they wanted in that moment.
Yeah. The question I would ask people about Stephen A. Smith for president, and I'm telling you, man, I get it from everywhere. Like, you'd be surprised some of the calls I've gotten when people, and I'm like, I'm down to talk to you about it, but I'm not going to say anything bad about him, first of all, because I don't think,
because everyone says I don't know him, but everyone says he's a nice guy off the air.
Yeah, he's a decent dude, but the part of this story that is problematic and ridiculous is not his fault.
Yeah.
Right? Like, the idea that we're entertaining it is not his fault. Even if he said, I should be the president, us entertaining it is not his fault. And so if he thinks he can be the president, then bless his heart, right? Like, I'm not going to be the one that says anything bad about him in the course of it. But it is why I just would throw this out to somebody at this point. Why him and not me? Not because I want it, but I'm just curious what people think, like what their explanation is. Now, if your explanation is, well, he's a lot more famous than you, cool. That makes perfect sense. But acknowledge what that means, right? Acknowledge like what that says about the whole situation. So that's where it always comes down to for me. It's just kind of like, how do we get here? Like, you people who are entertaining this, why did you pick this guy?
It's the movie Idiocracy. It just came 20 years earlier. Bomani,
but again,
thank
Trump,
you very.
I would say this right fast though. The thing I'll give Stephen A. credit for, you'll notice this. He doesn't say anything really critical of Trump. He has not said anything critical of Republicans. He has just picked the thing that we all can get behind. These Democrats.
They stink.
They stink. And everybody's like, hell yeah, that man tells
No, that's right. Yeah, that's the easiest thing. It's the easiest thing to say because in some ways it's true. Yes. Like, the mainstream Democrats are out of touch. We can all say that. Whereas, I've learned you can take people ask, well, how do you have conservative listeners? Here's the answer. You can take liberal positions. Just be very careful about taking shots at Trump, the person.
Yes. Right?
You can say, let's use the example of the Qatari plane. Do you think the president should take a plane, $400 million from a foreign country and then keep it when it's over? No. But if I say, do you think Trump should take a plane? Different conversation.
Right.
And so the key is, as much as possible, leave him out of it. Now, sometimes I don't, but that to me is the key, and Stephen A. is the king of that.
Yeah. Well, the other part too is conservatives can listen to someone with our politics more easily and readily than liberals can listen to someone with Trump's politics. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that is true.
For sure. And conservatives, I can do it because I have a country accent.
Yes.
Right? When's the last time you've seen a white country male on TV speaking Democrat politics?
Right. Right.
Ever.
And I can pull it
off.
And
you used to say that you thought people in North Carolina would listen to you because you were black and not a white liberal, because they really hate white liberals, especially educated ones.
They do. They hate them, and they don't know how to talk to them. But the other part is, when they've got something, I'll say they've got something. For example, they ran an end around on us about Biden a year ago and what his physical and mental constitution was, right?
Does that make you mad, by the way? It does me now.
Furious.
Because I liked Biden. I don't blame him. I blame the people around him. Do you?
And the reason the people around you do that is for their own jobs. Like, they were all, and look, we got a history of this happening with politicians. Like, this isn't the first time this has happened. But when that went down, I was doing the CNN show, and they tend to balance it out. And it was somebody was pushing back on the idea that the media was to blame for hiding this about Biden from us. And I was like, no, they have to be the blame, right? Either they didn't know, which is a problem, or they knew and didn't tell us, which is a problem. But once you're willing to say that, the conservatives are more likely to be like, oh, okay. And I think that, to be fair, goes for liberals also. Like, the liberals can appreciate the conservative that'll write for The Atlantic, for example.
Or the Bulwark, or those sites. Yes, they do. You're exactly right. The John McCains of the world, for lack of a better term.
Yeah, if the five of them that are left.
Yeah, there's not many. Bomani, thank you very much for doing this. And if I ever get another show, you'll be the first guest on that one, too.
Hey, brother, same here, man. I appreciate you.